very much for that introduction. Before I go any further, I'm just going to say I have spilt pizza on my pants, so you don't need to tell me. I know it's there. Well, now you're all going to be looking at the pants. Anyway, this is how I live my life. I am a clumsy, a little bit messy, but very honest, very real person. I have told stories and wanted to be on the stage since I was like that big. And when I was little, I always wanted to do little acts for my sisters, and I'd stand on the step outside of French windows in the living room, and I'd be doing a show for my sisters and then just close the curtain and watch telly. But I was never daunted, because I knew that one day I would be famous and then they would pay to come and see me do that show. And I was determined in some way that that would be what would happen. However, it wasn't quite like that. I went through school, I did my O-levels, I was very academic, I did sports, I did O-levels, I went on to do my A-levels, and I was like English, arts, literature, that was my thing. And it wasn't my thing straight away either, because I always thought I was going to be sciences. I wanted to be a midwife, and it didn't work out like that. Just couldn't apply myself to sciences that much, and I found I would naturally gravitated towards English and history and the arts. So I did my A-levels, English, history, politics, and then I got fed up of having no money through college, so I went to work. And the first job I did was working for the co-op as a management trainee. It was a job I absolutely detested, I have to say. I wished I was dead for 2 years. But it just wasn't me, because I knew in my heart of hearts what I wanted to do was something to do with music. So how did I find myself in management, working in an office, doing something that I didn't really want to do? And then just out of the blue, one day I was listening to the radio, and they said, we're starting a new radio show which we want young people to apply for. And I thought, do I apply, do I come into the category of a young person? Because they said, oh, between 13 and 18, and I was right at the top of the barrier. Like, I was 18. I thought, am I going to get in to do this show or not? And I remember writing my application to Piccadilly Radio, and I'm just mortified every day thinking about it. I'm mortified because I just covered it in perfume so that they'd know that this was someone who was really seriously, but I mean, it must have stunk, you know. And it was, you know, they did laugh about that for years and years later. Like, I was the one that sent the application on with obsession. I mean, exactly. But I did. I just wanted my application to stand out, and I really wanted to work in radio, and I got the job. I was a junior reporter on a show called Saturday Express. It was a young Chris Evans. He was 18 at the time, and a female broadcaster in Manchester called Becky One, and they were the figurehead presenters, and then the young people were roving reporters. So I did record reviews, I did gig reviews, I did theatre reviews, interviews. I remember interviewing Martin Fry from ABC, and it just gave me a taste for being in the music industry somehow. And I knew I loved working in radio. I just loved everything about it. So that was the beginning of my work in radio. How I got into DJing was totally by accident. It was nothing to do with the radio. It was nothing to do with my studies. It was nothing to do with anything at all, other than the fact that I've bought records since I was like 7, 8 years old. Well, when I was 7 and 8, I was getting my sisters to buy the records for me. And then when I was 10 and 11, I had a paper round, and I used to save my money, and I'd get my money, and I'd go into town at the end of the week, and I'd buy records. And I just had been buying records for a very long time. Fast forward to 1991, and a friend of a friend was putting on a club night at a really cool underground club called the Number One in Manchester. And she'd run out of money because she'd paid for the hire of the club, she'd paid for the printing of the flyers and the posters and everything, and she couldn't afford to book a DJ. And a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, said, why don't you ask Paulette to do it? She's got loads of records, she'll do it. I'd never DJ'd in my life before. I'd never touched a deck in my life. I didn't know what... I'd been to clubs, I knew there was a DJ playing records, but I didn't connect that for me at all, at all. But they asked me, and she said she would give me £30 to do the whole night, play from 9 o'clock till 2 in the morning without a break. But in 1991, 30 quid was a lot of money, so, you know, I was earning, mate. No, I was properly earning. And I was happy with that, and I went out and spent £150 on records, and that's how it stays. That's how it stays, because I was, for some reason, I knew that £150 I spent on records would be a good investment. I've never regretted spending that 150 quid, because from doing that party at the Number One, the people that were about to put on a club night at the Hacienda heard me play. They liked what I did, and they asked us to host their second room. They asked me to host their second room, which I did for 4.5 years. I went from never having DJ'd at all to DJing at the best club in Manchester and the best club in the north of England and one of the best clubs in the world. Iconic clubs. But it was pure accident. A happy accident, but it was pure accident. From then, I mean, I'll tell this very quickly because I've only got like 15 minutes to talk. But after playing at the Hacienda, I left Manchester and went to live in London. I started to work for a record label. I worked for Talking Loud, Mercury Records, so I worked for Giles Peterson at Talking Loud, and I did all the press for his label. I worked for Def Jam, Manifesto, Fontana. I launched the careers of various bands and people. Ronnie Size Represent, New We Console, For Hero, to the press in the UK, Terry Callier as well. And with house music, Todd Terry, Masters at Work, David Morales, these were all the people that I had the good fortune of working with. And that wasn't DJing. I just fell into press through DJing and writing for magazines, but I'd been writing for magazines. Fast forward to 2004, I'd been DJing in London for 10 years, and I hit the glass ceiling. I just couldn't get any further with what I wanted to do. Nobody was giving me any more work. I just couldn't seem to get any higher than where I was. And I was touring for the Ministry of Sound. I was doing international tours for them. But my career just felt like it was at a standstill. So I moved. I did the thing that I always do when I'm stuck. I moved. And I moved from London this time. So I'd moved from Manchester to London, first of all, when I hit that ceiling. This time I moved from London to Paris. And when I hit Paris, I couldn't speak French. I didn't have a single friend that lived there that spoke English. And it was like the maddest thing I have ever done in my life. But I just, again, like spending that £150 in Manchester, I just felt like it was the right thing to do. I really followed my gut instinct. And it was the right thing to do because I landed in Paris at a time when they were very open to hearing new music. And I brought a lot of house music and a different way of presenting the music because I dance and sing and make a lot of eye contact and tell jokes, and I'm a bit ditzy and just share music in a way that most DJs don't do it. I'm not one of those DJs. I'm one of these. So I went from being unknown to playing a massive street party in 2005 called Solidays. There were 30,000 people in the streets of Paris. And I played with Etienne de Crécy and Bob Sinclair. And it was just the biggest party I could have had the chance. It was a charity as well. It was for SIDA, which is an AIDS charity. And it got a lot of attention, and I just played really well. And I played really well before the heavens opened as well, so I played with the good weather. Everything just went right. And after then, I stayed in Paris for 9 years, and it's probably professionally and financially the best 9 years of my life. But at the end of those 9 years, I hit the wall with the music and I lost faith. And what do you do when you lose faith with the music that you're playing? It's a real crisis. It was an actual crisis. And I asked my managers if I could change my music. They said no. I asked the radio station that I was working for if I could change my music, and they said no. I asked the club that I was working for if I could change my music and do something different, and they said no. So I just wrote 3 letters of resignation, posted them all on the same day. Did that, packed my boxes and moved to Spain. Which again is absolute madness. I wouldn't recommend it because I moved to Spain without anything. This time I'd moved with, I mean, I've got my profile, but I hadn't built. It's like that move was the stupidest move that I've ever done. And I really, in saying I wouldn't recommend it, plan everything. Have a plan. Have a plan A, have a plan B, have a plan C, D, E, F, G, and whatever till the Z, but plan everything. Am I running out of time there?
No, you've got 3 minutes and then you've got another 5.
Right, okay, so yes, please do plan everything, because if I can tell any mistakes that I have made, that one is probably the biggest one, because I really didn't think about it long enough or hard enough. I didn't make the contacts, I didn't back myself up, I didn't have the work or any of that. So by the time I got to Spain, the work was really difficult. I couldn't get the work rolling enough. I wasn't making enough money. I was spending my savings to stay out there and live out there. It was all just mad. But I learned a lot of good, hard lessons about what it takes to run your creative career as a business. And really, seriously, it is a business. So planning is massively important. At the end of the 3 years, I just knew, looking at it as a business plan, looking at my taxes, looking at my returns, that I wasn't making money, I was losing money. And there's something in business that says if you're not making money by the end of 3 years, you need to stop. You need to stop, regroup, and think about what you're doing, because otherwise it's just going to go on a steady slide downwards and it's not going to work for anyone. So at the end of those 3 years, I went back to the UK. I went back to the UK because my mother was ill. So I had really gone back to look after my mum. And it was a really hard 2 years because I became the primary carer for my mum. That meant that I had to back shelf my career for 2 years. Now, 6 months out of the business is a tough one. 2 years out of the business is like, I mean, pretty much everyone thinks you're finished. So how do you come back after 2 years? I started literally from nothing. I started DJing in bars again, earning really rubbish money, £30, £50, doing it for free. I ate a lot of humble pie to get my career back. And now it's back on a level where I'm earning good money, but I've learned a lot of lessons about how to do it and how really to reboost your career and rebrand yourself when it looks like it's all going tits up, if you'll excuse the French. So I've seen a lot of highs. I've had police escorts through the streets of Paris to get to a gig, which has never happened since. That was amazing, and I would recommend it. That I would recommend. What I wouldn't recommend is really seeing the dark side of your career not working, and not working because of a mistake I've made, because of a mistake I've made myself, because of a mistake I made not thinking about it long enough or hard enough. That was a downside. So yeah, that was my DJing career, totally by accident, and I wouldn't actually change it for the world. I have stayed with this career the longest of anything I've ever done. I've been a TV presenter, haven't talked about that, haven't got enough time. I do radio shows as well. I'm on Reform Radio every month, and I do occasional shows for Gadio as well. I am a mentor and a workshop facilitator and a public speaking coach. I work for NCS The Challenge. I train young people every summer and every autumn, which I love. The one thing that I would recommend with any career, whether it's creative or administrative, stick with your passion. Really stick with something that you're passionate about, because if you're passionate about it, it will never seem like a day's work. It will just seem like you're living your life and getting on with it and sharing that with everybody else. Has anyone got any questions? Yes?
You said that you should have a plan A, B, C, D.
To Z, yeah.
There is another school of thought that says that you shouldn't have a plan B, just because if you have a plan B, you won't give plan
Yeah,
A.
I mean, I did, but that's what I thought at the beginning, is like, there is no, and I heard myself saying to my sister, there is no plan B, it's music or nothing. And you do have to be, in a way, one-track minded like that. There is no plan B. But strategically, there has to be a plan B, because what you can't predict are shifts in the economy, shifts in taste. You know, what I've seen in the 20 odd years that I've been DJing, you fall in and out of favour, and it happens really quickly. And it happens with actors, it happens with designers, it happens with writers. You know, 1 year a style of writing is really, really popular, and then the next year they want blogs, and then the next year they want something historic, and then the next year they want something else. So you have to be able to be flexible enough, whether you've got a plan B or not. You've got to be flexible enough to move with those shifts. So that is where I would say have a plan B, or at least maybe not a plan B, but have a second sort of career or a second string to your bow that will enable your career to grow with those shifts and changes. Is that all right? Yeah? I know that was a bit intense, but like that I've lived that, and I remember saying, I haven't got a plan B, it's music or nothing, but you do have to think a bit about that. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
Well, throughout the whole process, obviously, you're always going to be learning stuff. What would you say the most you learned was? Was it through the easy bits or
The hardest. The hardest.
In terms of importance?
Absolutely. I think don't be afraid to fail either. I've failed massively. I've not even started to tell you the stories about the mistakes I made, because I've made a lot of them. I've made a lot of mistakes in terms of this networking thing that we've done today is key. It really is key. And if you don't do it enough, like, it's very easy to disappear. It is really easy to disappear. And if you want to get a job working in this company or that company, or go a little bit higher, the networking is really important. And when you stop doing it, you kind of render yourself invisible. So really you can't underestimate or put a high enough price on how valuable networking is. And that is one of the mistakes I have actually made, is not doing it enough. And every time I've moved, and this is another thing I would say don't burn your bridges. Because I moved from Manchester to London, and when I moved, I stopped dealing with the people in Manchester. Never do that. You've got to keep those relationships going even if you're not there. And then when I moved from London to Paris, again, I didn't keep those relationships going. And you need to keep the wheels turning all the time, because what happens when you need to go back is that they're like, well, you know, we've not seen her for ages. Why should we give her any work? But if you just pick up the phone, send a text, hi, how are you, once a month or once a week or something, you just keep yourself present in the people's heads that you need to be present in. So that's another mistake. But I think, actually, I've learned a lot more from my failures than my successes. And thankfully, you know, the failures I've made in Ibiza, which were massively financial more than anything, they taught me to keep an eye on my taxes, keep an eye on how much I was earning, to know my own worth, to know when to say no to something and to know when to say yes to a certain amount. You know, that lesson, and also how to structure my work when working in bars, because the work in Ibiza is bar work, but only for 3 months. And when I moved back to Manchester and I had nothing, I saw bar work, but for 12 months. And I just protracted that. I just took everything I'd learned from Ibiza and times it by 4 and made the contacts with the bars and made sure I had a year's work and not just 12 weeks. So in that way, even though I didn't get the work in Ibiza, it taught me how to get the work in Manchester. So it wasn't that bad.
So I really love that you kind of split the work of being a creative in two. So you talk about, you've talked a lot about the machinery that helps support the art or the music that you play.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in how you fuel the actual creativity. So how you, in the slumps when you're not doing so well, how do you keep the faith about your music or your art or your photography, specifically with you?
It's a funny thing. I think my mum is, well, when I was born, my mum was a jazz singer and a cabaret singer. And my whole family are just crazy about music. We've all bought music. So for me, even though music is something I work with, music is my absolute saviour. So when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling happy, when I'm feeling like elated, everything, music for me is just the number one salve or balm that I could put on anything. Music is like the blood in my veins. But if I can't play music, I go swimming. I've adopted my sister's dog. You know, it's not my dog, but she pays the vet bills. I walk the dog. That's how it works. But it's important, you know, just get out in nature. If it's not working, get out in nature. Go and have a walk in the park. Go and have a walk down the end of the street. Start jogging. Go swimming. Go and talk to a friend. You know, but I also have stopped drinking. I don't take drugs. You know, there are certain things that I have had to do that help me and help my mind to stay on the even when times are going up and down like that. You know, certain things just don't help you. And, you know, I've had certain experiences of both of those things where I'd say, oh no, it was fantastic. But to be honest, the best times I'm having is when I'm straight in my head. So that's how I've dealt with it. Yes?
What made you want to move to Paris?
Well, when I was 7, there was an advert on telly for a coffee called Nescafé, which I loved. And there was this woman on it, and she was dressed in a particular way with a scarf tied like that, and a little pencil skirt and a stripy top, and I wanted to be this woman, and it was just, that was the start of my love affair with Paris, and it was all very stupid and all very ridiculous. It was nothing to do with I want to go to Paris because it's like this amazing city with the great architecture and the music and the this. It was just an advert like on telly, and I wanted to be French like her, so that's what I did. That's what I did, and when I got to Paris, I couldn't speak French. I was traumatized for 2 weeks. I couldn't open a bank account. I had arguments with my boyfriend. It was a disaster. And I thought, my family thought I was going to move back home in 6 weeks, and I stayed there 9 years. So there you go. Yeah. Anyone else?
Can you speak French now?
Oui, je peux. Oui, je peux parler français très très bien, ouais. Je peux avoir des disputes et tout. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Un peu, ouais. Yes, and a little bit of Spanish as well, and poquito de español. But that I did really badly. Yeah. Anyone else? Oh, it scared everyone. It must be the tomato sauce on my pants. So everyone's desperate. Anything else?
Question to Paulette.
Oh, we did it?
Yes.
So, like, being a DJ, like, how did you, like, at the beginning of your career, it was, like, vinyl and stuff?
Yes.
So, like, do you still mix some vinyl, or, like, how did you, like, deal with technology moving
Yeah, that's a great question. I did, when I started DJing, it was just vinyl. So I was lugging boxes of vinyl, 20 to 23 kilos of vinyl. I used to have 2 boxes of vinyl. So, yeah, you will now know why I have a chiropractor and an osteopath. And that isn't a joke, it is true. I've got bursitis in both of my shoulders from carrying record boxes about for all that time. So I do not miss vinyl. I am very happy to have 2 USB sticks which weigh absolutely flap all but have 6,000 tunes on each of them. But I can use vinyl, I can use Serato, and I can use USB. And I would recommend for everyone that in order to stay in the game and try and stay ahead of the game and stay with all the technology as it develops. I'm not great with Pioneer and the CDJs, but I do use CDJ Nexus 2000s. That's what's on my rider. But it helps if you move with it and don't just do that thing, because I know a lot of DJs do that thing where it's like, oh, vinyl's all there is, and that's all anyone should play, and it's great, it's elitist and it's wonderful, and every piece of vinyl costs between 12 and 20 quid. But I'm not one of these elitist DJs. I think music is for everyone, and I think it doesn't matter what format you play music on, as long as the tune is good, and as long as it's not on a pokey 98 kbp MP3, as long as it's a good sound file, then play it, you know. So yeah, I play all of it, and I don't regret losing the record boxes, but I do still occasionally play vinyl sets. I play vinyl sets where the sound has been set up specifically for good vinyl sound. There's no point in playing vinyl in a club that's been set up for digital sound, because the vinyl sounds rubbish. So I'm very particular. I'll play vinyl at 33 in Manchester, which has a really nice sound system, but everywhere else I play digital. Thank you for that question. That's a good one. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, there's one last, otherwise we're going to, that was a great one.
Oh yeah, by the way, there weren't very many women when I started.
Yeah. Do you still have your vinyl?
Yes, I do still have my vinyls. I had a lot stolen, but I do still have a lot as well. I had a lot stolen, I had a lot damaged in a flood. That's the other reason that I stopped being so particular and possessive. There was a flood and my music got damaged, and then I stopped being so particular about it.
I mean, so much more really, and there's so many other stories. But it's
Yeah,
so fantastic.
millions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just hit the nail on the head. I knew when we met up recently. I was like, Paulette to do the first one because this is an important one to get the vibe going, and you've done exactly that.
Thank you.
And you know, I think everything that you've talked about, your responses to challenge and the way that you dealt with stuff along the way, with humour, but also you know the hardship.
And there's been
the pearls of wisdom.
plenty, and you know certainly even now. And this is something that happened on Friday, and it's my closing. On Friday, I was DJing at the Refuge, and I was playing a 7-hour set, disco, funk, rare groove. Everyone's having a really great time. And a woman came up to me and said, I'd really love to play music in front of people like you. And I said, well, why don't you? And she went, because I'd be rubbish. And I said, well, have you ever done it before? And she said, no. And I said, well, how do you know? And she didn't have an answer. And I find it massively frustrating that even now in 2019, people find it weird to see a woman behind the decks. And not only do they find it weird to see a woman behind the decks, they find it weird to think themselves behind the decks. They don't think they can do it. Nobody is born knowing how to do what they end up doing in life. Not Einstein, not Stephen Hawking, not Florence Nightingale, not Usain Bolt. Nobody knows how to do what they end up doing. We learn, and anyone can do anything. There is no gender difference. If you want to run, if you want to write a poem, if you want to be a scientist, if you want to change the world, it doesn't matter what sex you are. If you want to do it and you can think yourself into doing it, go ahead and do it and just try. But the second you say you can't, you never will. And that's all I'm saying.